What is going on, Diesel Nation? We're excited to have you guys with us today on the Diesel Podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube and aren't subscribed, make sure and click the subscribe button, like, comment, and let us know what you think about the episode. If you have a particular request for a guest or topic that you want covered, we're always checking comments on YouTube and love to be able to take your guys' suggestions and then work them into future episodes. Today, I'm going to be joined by a listener. He messaged in. He had a really cool story about building his DMAX, and I wanted to chat with him more about the truck, the build, how he's done it. It's a really cool setup, so we know you guys are going to enjoy listening to it. Before we get to it, though, I want to remind you our friends over at Kershaw Knives have a 20% off site-wide discount code for you. So use code 23diesel20 at kershaw.kaiusa.com. It's a great way to save some money, get some cool gear, whether you need it for EDC or hunting, fishing, something to throw in a toolbox or have around the job site, around the house. They've got a ton of new models in 2023. The latest is the Duralock model, which has a really smooth opening mechanism. It's priced right, works well for, having in a pocket or, a toolbox, something like that. The blade's made out of D2 steel, and there's a bunch of different designs. So if you're in the market, definitely make sure and head on over to their website, check them out, and use code 23diesel20 for 20% off site-wide. All right, let's get to today's episode, chatting with Christian about his DMAX build and learning about the setup and some challenges and things he overcame in building his dream truck. Christian, welcome to the Diesel Podcast. I appreciate you reaching out to me and sharing this really cool LML build, which in all the episodes we've ever done on the podcast, I don't think nobody's ever been on with the exact setup that you got for turbo transmission and everything. So I look forward to chatting with you and learning more about the truck.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Patrick. Thanks for having me on.
Tell me a bit about the LML. Like, what was it your first diesel truck? Was it was it the first truck that kind of captured your attention, or what's the history with it?
Yeah, so growing up, my dad always had he had an LBZ, and then I was probably about 6 at the time when he had the LBZ, and then he had about 5 LMLs after that. And he always everyone's gonna disagree with me here, but he had really good luck with them. He probably put over 1 million miles on LMLs, mostly trouble free. And I kind of just liked the body style, and I grew up around them, so that was what I wanted. And it was my first diesel truck coming out. I dropped out of college, end of 2018, early 2019, and middle of 2019 I bought the truck, August.
Was it
And then
now, was there a particular color, like body, like crew cab, extended cab,
yep.
regular cab? What were you looking for when you were shopping for it?
So my first truck was a gas 98 gas 2500 single cab, and I knew I didn't want a single cab again. And then everybody had white or black, so gray was kind of a color I always liked and thought I could do something with. So I found a gray LML, and that's where it all started.
When
It was
you
just a work truck.
yeah, when you first had it, using it for work, did you keep it relatively stock, or did you do like some upgrades to it, or what started the process of modifying the truck?
Yeah, so it just had some 20 by 12s, nothing crazy. And it was a work truck. And then I had some tie rod issues, just worn out. The truck had 200, almost 200,000 at the time. So went right to kryptonite, did some upper control arms, had them powder coated. I was, wanting to do a little bit of customization myself, and some Fox shocks. And that was pretty much where it sat and stayed. And then from there, I just swapped wheels. I had a different wheel set up every other week, it seemed like at the time.
Did the when did the power come in? When did you get bored with the stock power, or what? Or maybe you had some friends that modified their trucks. You're like, well, I got to keep up with them or beat
Yeah.
them, or
Yeah. So actually, a buddy of mine had a 6.4 with an S300 on it. And I loved the way it sounded. And I started looking into doing it on a Duramax and realized it sounded, fairly similar. And I love the sound of a big single. Well, I guess at the time it wasn't a big single, it was just an little S366, but that's the route I went, and backed it up with a 10 mil and left the stock injector, stock trans, 10 mil CP3 conversion. And that was where I started to get into racing. I had the kryptonite front end, so my buddies raced. One of my buddies had a P pump 24 valve, and then another one of my buddies, actually one bad VP44, TJ, had his VP truck, and he'd always come down and race with us. And so that's kind of what got me into racing.
was it something where the first time you went out, you knew you were hooked on racing, like
Yeah.
the first pet.
Yeah. Yep. There was no doubt in my mind. I've always been an adrenaline junkie through and through. I ride between snowmobiles, dirt bikes, everything growing up. But racing really hooked me, and I started realizing that the LMLs did not like to shift when I had that S300 on and was trying to race it.
And that's, I think a lot of us, when we get into diesel performance, it kind of starts like that, and then we start to race it, and it almost feels like in the back of our minds we're thinking, okay, how long is it going to last till I break something
Hmm.
major? Like how long were you able to do it until there was a either a failure with the transmission or engine or turbo or whatever it might have been?
Yeah. I made it about 3,000 miles, but I think half of those miles were either going down the track or doing burnouts. So I probably had it coming. And that setup is notorious for snapping cranks. It's the stock injectors and cranking the pulse width is just that's the no-go. That's a recipe for snapping a crank.
Educate me a bit on when the crank snaps, because I haven't personally experienced it or haven't taken
Mhm.
a Duramax to that level. Is it catastrophic where it takes out the whole engine, or is it something where, like, how in depth do you have to go to fix it?
Um, it really depends, and you don't know until you get in there, and it depends on how long you run it after it snaps. Mine snapped. I actually went on a 500-mile trip with cruise control set, and it was probably the longest I ever drove the thing nice. And getting on the off ramp to go home after 500 miles of driving it nice, hitting the brakes, and it started knocking bad. And I think everybody's seen the videos and heard that sound and pretty much knows right away it's either a crank or a piston with an LML, especially if your tuning is not, tuning's a large part in it too. Um, when I tore mine down, there was no real cylinder wall damage. Pistons all look good, rods look good. That the front main bearings, it broke between the two and three, just like 90% of the Duramaxes do. And those main bearings were a little tore up, but other than that, everything else looked pretty good.
What was the next step after the teardown, and putting together a plan for building it back better, stronger, able to handle more power and racing?
Yeah, I found a compound kit, an S483 over an S369 kit for an LML for a really good deal, and realized, it kept pretty much the same Valley charger that I had before as a single. So I knew the drivability would be pretty good with that setup, but I wanted to back it with the injectors this time, and I did go with a built short block from DMAX Store, excuse me. They built the short block. It's just cast piston, Molly cast pistons, curl H beam rods, and Callie's cranking it, girdle, main studs.
Very cool. We just had them on the podcast talking about common failures and fixes with
Hmm.
with Duramaxes. And as far as putting the fueling together, the turbo, the engine build, everything, was there a particular goal that you had in mind, either for a
Hmm.
power level, a quarter mile time, an eighth mile time? What were your goals with the build?
Yeah, at that time, I wanted a truck that I could take to shows, take to meets, race on the weekends, race with my buddies. Really, I wasn't looking for anything too crazy, low 11s, maybe crack into the 10s. And I wanted to be able to street drive it still. That was always the goal. And I wanted to drive it a lot at the time. And then the more I got into it, the more I realized it's just, well, I was also learning at the time. I'm not a diesel mechanic by trade or anything. I got a roofing company. And so it was definitely a learning curve and a lot of mistakes and a lot of failure putting it together. And it did not turn into a street vehicle, to say the least.
What would you say are a handful of mistakes that you made that you would do differently again with the build?
Um, that's a hard question. I wouldn't say I'd do anything differently going back. I definitely enjoyed the process, but definitely specking everything out to what you want beforehand and knowing what you want. Because I fought rail issues and going back and forth with different people. No, that 10 mil should be fine with the injectors turned down. And it really wasn't, or the transmission will be fine and never shifted right and stuff like that. So definitely just picking a setup that is somebody else is familiar with that has experience if you're doing it yourself and going that route and following what somebody else has done that you know works. Because honestly, going back, the only different thing I would have done to keep it a street vehicle is I would have kept a VGT in the valley to keep the RPMs down because LMLs do not like to shift at higher RPMs.
Were there companies or people or builds like you mentioned where people had sort of laid the groundwork for a setup that works? Who either was a great mentor or somebody you could lean on, or a great
Mm-hmm.
maybe another build out there that you really followed who helped you along the way?
Yeah, the guys from Dan's helped me a lot. They're pretty local to me. They're about 35 minutes away, and they're all friends of mine, and they helped me with a lot of the stuff. And then some of the builds, there really wasn't any. I've always been one to want to do things differently from everybody else, and maybe that's kind of been my kryptonite and why it's taken 3.5, 4 years to get a truck dialed in. But I I don't know. I guess Jeremy, his last name I cannot remember. He's got a S485 over a drop in on an LML, 10 mil and 60% overs, and that truck runs low 11s all day long. And that was the setup I was shooting for, is what he has in his truck now.
With with setting up a goal, I think because it sounds like you're trying to do something that not many people had done. And I think when we get a truck, we kind of want to do things a little bit different, do it our own way, make it unique. Where where did the inspiration come from, or the idea of I want to do it? I want to go this fast. Um, was it to be one of the faster LMLs out there? Was it to
Mhm.
compete with another, like a Cummins, or one one of the Power Strokes out there? Or what was
Yeah.
the real driving force with that?
One of my buddies that lives about 40 minutes away, and our friendships kind of built on talking smack to each other. He's had a handful of 6.4s, and we, always going back and forth. So I think that was kind of step one in it. And then after I went 128 in the quarter, I realized I wanted to chase that 9 second mark since nobody had done it yet. And I still don't think anyone's done it on an LMM or newer, as far as I'm aware. I know Dante is chasing nines as well. He should get theirs this year. Um, and honestly, if things work how they say they're going to work with this 48 swap, it shouldn't be an issue getting the nines. But it's all hypothetical. No, as far as I'm aware, nobody's done the 48 conversion on an LMM or an LML or newer yet.
I'm glad you brought that up because I really wanted to chat with you about that. As I've heard about them on the older Duramax trucks, but
Mm-hmm.
not an LML. Tell me about the reason for going with the 48, and then how
Mm-hmm.
difficult it's been to get it all to work electronically, to get it fit in there. How the whole process has been of swapping it in.
It has been a process, to say the least. LMLs are too smart for their own good when it comes to making them do what you want them to do and trying to get by. So the ECM is tied into the TCM, and isolating that DMAX swap is taking care of that with their standalone ECM. And then from there, you lose your BCM. So you lose your headlights, taillights, all that stuff, all your interior controls, everything you lose. So that's been wired by me over the past 4 months. And I would say I have well over 200 hours into it.
Wow.
And then when it actually came time to getting the trans in, the cross member that supports the rear of the trans is actually moved backwards on an LML an inch and a half, which I found out when installing the trans. Luckily, I was able to make that work with some at home fabrication with the adapter plates, and then the front drive shaft does hit the rear cover adapter plate as well. So that took a little bit of grinding down. Then after that, it's just getting a couple of custom drive shafts made, and the trans it's a full manual valve body, so that's on a ratchet shifter, keeps that nice and simple. And then the ECM side is, well, that's to be determined in the next about week and a half here when that comes in.
The electronic part really interests me because I think, where would you go to find the resources to make all the lights work everything like that. That seems like that would be a big challenge to do that.
Yeah, yes, it has been. And I mean, a lot of them are just, 12-volt power and ground, which kind of keeps it simple. And I did everything on relays under the hood, which I'm sure you can find some pictures on my Instagram or whatever of that. And that's been a process. But where I've really ran into issues is like the front differential actuator. It's actually not switched with 12-volt power, it's switched with ground. So that took a little bit of figuring out. And then like I had an auto transfer case out of a LOI in it, and getting that to work has been a process. I just still think I'm gonna end up going to a manual transfer case in the next week here. Other than that, everything else was pretty straightforward when it comes to that. Other than the brake pedal sensor was a little tricky too. It's a 5-wire plug, and trying to figure out, which one's your on-off switch when you hit the brake pedal.
As far as the build itself, the 48RE, how did was it one? Did you go? Oh, I'm sure you went with a full billet setup and all
Mhm.
that stuff. But what, like jumping into the 48RE world from being, having an Allison,
Mhm.
being in the Duramax, what was the learning curve like with knowing, okay, what stall converter do I want? What kind of input
Yeah.
shaft am I going to go with? All those questions.
Yeah, so I bought the transmission setup from Andrew Reitmeyer. It's a oversized input shaft, oversized output shaft, and then billet intermediate. And it's a Garand custom bolt together converter. It's actually an Allison based converter, which is something cool that they did. And other than that, it's so I really didn't build much on it per se. But I've had a lot of questions, and pretty much I just call the guys at Maverick Diesels. They're good buddies of mine, and just annoy them whenever I need to figure something out.
Where's the build at right now? How close are you to having it wrapped up?
So I'm getting the cage in this weekend, and then I'm not sure when DMAX Swap's going to have the wiring harness and ECM back. And then once that's done, I mean, it's real close. Drive shafts, valve body, start it up, and hopefully get it out to the track probably the day before I leave for UCC, if I'm being honest. That's what it's looking like at this point.
That's the goal,
And
is
then,
to make it to UCC.
yep, yep, that is the goal, is UCC, and I want to run the 6,000 to 7,200 pound class at UCC.
With with testing it, how much test time do you think you'll have to make sure everything's working the way you want, getting it set up? Is it going to be is it going to be
It's
pretty
going to
close?
be tight. It's going to be tight. It's something that I'm used to. Pretty much every time I've set a deadline, it ends up getting done about a day or two before. And I keep telling myself I need to stop setting deadlines, but it's just, I don't know, there's something about the crunch time that's, I don't know if it's the thrill or what, but I love that. And setting the deadlines is what keeps me motivated, honestly, because it is a lot of labor. It's been between, because I'm working my day job and then going up, my shop's 30 minutes from my house, and then going up there and work until 10, 11 o'clock at night, back home waking up at 6 in the morning. It's pretty much 5 days a week of that.
Have there been any points in this process where you've thought, man, maybe this isn't worth it, or maybe I should get a different truck or platform and have this be my daily driver? Have there been those moments when it's just been tough to find motivation?
Yes, yes, there's been a lot of those days. The truck has been posted, I think, once or twice for sale actually, and I just can't bring myself to sell it. I'm not a quitter, I guess. I really, once I set a goal, I have to achieve it no matter what. That's just how my mind works. And it would have been a lot easier to go take a single cab third gen and slap an S480 on it and some 300s and go run, low sixes, but it's just not the route I want to go.
I think that's it's something that I find, talking about a build like this or some of the others that we've covered, is the owner wants to do something unique because, like you said, it is. I don't want to say it's easy, but there's so many recipes to take a third gen
Yeah.
5.9, make that power, run those times, And it's definitely not with throwing a 48RE and an LML and running the charger that you're running
Hmm.
and getting everything to work so that the lights work and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
It's a major undertaking, but I bet when it's done and you look at it, and you're probably going to get a lot of people that ask questions that are
Hmm.
interested, and it's sort of blazing a trail with it,
Yeah.
not just with the power and the times, but then the upgrades you've done to it.
Yeah, exactly. And we're not going to be breaking any horsepower records for sure, but it is fairly light, and everybody else struggles with getting an Allison to shift in an LML. And I think if we can get around that and have it fuel properly still and not be pulling fuel out, then nines will not be an issue. And honestly, once I get into the nines, it's going to be all eighth mile racing from there. And I'm just going to keep adding nitrous and seeing what it does. I got 3 kits on it now. Um, so we're going to hopefully have those at least enough testing to run those at UCC. And I know my class is pretty stacked. I know like Greg A is bringing the black quad cab, and then Hunter Coffee, his truck made 2200 at Firepunk. Pretty sure he's running that class. Zach Pennock's running that class. Yeah, there's a quite a few guys that are going to be making a lot more power than me running there.
I think following the build is what's really cool too. So like as an outsider just looking in is being able to catalog it. And you mentioned starting a YouTube channel, which I wanted to chat with you
Mm-hmm.
about a little bit as well, because it's so helpful to be able to watch and see things and I think kind of get a glimpse behind the build itself. So what's it been like turning on a camera, talking about the truck, maybe showing things that you're building with it? How's that gone?
Honestly, at first it was kind of weird, and then once you kind of get used to talking in front of the camera, it becomes almost second nature. I mean, I've only posted like 7 or 6 videos, I think. Honestly, I've gotten really good support, and it's just something that I do have been doing because I figured why not? I'm doing it anyway. Might as well just record it and post it, and it's something that I enjoy. And a lot of the videos are more so just based around everyday progress on it. And then when there's events that come around, I go to a lot of the events and do kind of behind the scenes or whatever, videos around the event. And a lot of guys don't do that in the comp scene. There's a few out there. Josh McCormick does a pretty good job of covering that, but there's not many guys that are doing it. So
I think it helps to be able to reach people and see it in a different way than we used to, like way back when like forums were a thing, is you could follow builds and there'd be
mhm.
pictures and things. But I think being able to capture things, on video, especially with a unique build like this and some of the challenges you've overcome and the whole setup
Yeah,
with it, it's really cool to just turn it on and watch. And I know people, when they're listening, they're going to think, well, I want to see what his truck does. I want to see how he wraps up the build. I want to see
yeah.
what it does at UCC, things like that. How can they find your YouTube channel?
It's Wikibuilt, WICKYBUILT, and then my socials are all based around that as well. They're all linked in all the videos in the description, so you can find me there. And then at UCC, I mean, come out and say hi. I always enjoy talking to people, and I'll be in the pits. We'll be all set up. Uh, you know, kind of hard to miss the truck with the yellow powder coat, and really stands out.
What other events do you plan on going to after UCC?
Um, Probably make it down to Shides, and then Michiana is on the list. I probably stay pretty local to me around the Wisconsin area after that. A lot of the events are pretty far out on the East Coast, but Shides is one I want to make it to, and then Volga, Iowa, Volga City Truck Cruise. That's an event we've gone to for four years now, and that's an absolute blast. Michiana, we always been going to Michiana. That one's fun too. Hopefully do some dirt drags up at Michiana. And then the big one's Hub City in the fall. That one's in Wisconsin. There's a big payout for that one. It's over 20 grand, I believe, actually, for dirt drags and dyno.
I was just thinking, so with this truck, it's going to be pretty much. Is it going to be one you're going to daily drive all the time, or is it going to take like the place of this is going to be your competition truck, something you race, and you're going to get
Mm-hmm.
another daily driver? I was curious, would you get another LML, or what would be your plan with a daily?
Um, Well, I did cross to the dark side when it came to a daily. I do have a 21 Ram 3500 for the Cummins. So I did cross to the dark side on that one. Um, but this will be a competition truck and it's gonna go, I don't know, dyno events. I'm not big on the bracket racing. For me, it's always been going as fast as you possibly can. And honestly, I don't think the truck's gonna be fast enough for 590 this year. And then on top of that, having to be consistent enough to compete with guys that, it's the money excuse, but you can't do a staging limit on an LML unless you go to a Motec. I don't have Motec money. And you can't do a true DSP5 on an LML to do a staging limiter. I could do a trans brake, but to me, I'd rather just go out, run as fast as I can, shifting that trans manually and just see what it can do and have fun. Honestly, that's the big thing for me is I started, way back, started diving into the show scene side of things, and I realized I hated it and I was like, I'm just gonna do, what I enjoy, and I've had a lot more fun since.
That's an interesting point that that you made about finding what you enjoy, because I think there can
Hmm.
be a lot of pressure to maybe that even we put on ourselves, but it's to go out
Hmm.
there and race and make the most power. And it's something I've chatted about a little bit with some guests is the power levels have gotten so incredibly high, and the cost to do it
Hmm.
has gotten so incredibly high versus what it
Yeah.
used to be. It's trying to find that spot where the everyday guy can go out there, do a build, have some fun with it, and
Yeah.
you have to really enjoy it because look at all the work you've put into it and the time and the
Yeah.
effort and overcoming things. You have to really enjoy it to go to those lengths.
Yeah. This is now 3 years in a row I've had the engine and transmission out. Um, so it's a lot of time and a lot of dedication. And honestly, people don't realize, I guess, how much dedication it takes. Because up until 2 months ago, the truck was built in a one car garage. Parts piled on top of parts, and there's a 3 foot walkway around the truck, and that's all the room you got. And up until 2 months ago, when I finally jumped on a 40 by 30 shop with a buddy, um, that's where I built it. And I did the whole powder coat thing, powder coated the truck's powder coated from front to back, cross members, torsion bars, torsion keys, dust shields, everything's powdered on the truck. And I had a set of 2414 American Forces with custom powdered, and I started going into the show scene, and I realized pretty quick it just wasn't the scene that I enjoyed being around. It wasn't the people I enjoyed being around. And the more I got into the performance side and the competition side, started making some really, really good friends. Um, and I've loved every second of it since.
It was
And I
really.
think a lot of it, oops, sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I think a lot of it honestly comes from being able to stay dedicated wise comes from not doing it as a day job. And I think that's been talked about a few times on here. Um, I mean, some guys are able to, work on the trucks all day, every day, and then still build their own. But you see a lot of guys that once they start a shop, they kind of stop tinkering with their own stuff because it honestly it just feels like you're at work still, and that's something that I've always tried to avoid.
Yeah, I think the balance with it is really key because you made a good point with when you have a shop, you've got customers, you've got to get their trucks out, and it's hard to find
Hmm.
time to work on
Hmm.
your race truck or project truck that you're building. So I think just finding something that you really enjoy and then the patience, which is so tough, but something like what you're putting together, you gotta have some patience with it, figuring out
Hmm.
all these things and getting it together. But I appreciate you reaching out to us and sharing this build. It was really unique. Once you mentioned 48 RE and the turbo setup and everything you were doing, I was like, well, we got to chat about we got to chat about this
Yeah,
this
yeah, it's
LML.
definitely.
It's cool. So where can people find you on like Instagram, social media, TikTok, any place that you post videos,
Yeah.
truck pictures?
So my Instagram is wiki_CW, and then my TikTok is wikys.alt, wickys.alt. That was my backup account. I actually deleted my first account. That was kind of when I was going through hating the show scene side, and so that's where it's at now.
Very cool. Well, keep us updated on it. Let us know, how it does. If when you get in the nines, let us know so we can do a
Yep,
podcast about Nella Mill and the nines. We chatted with Dante not long ago about
yep.
doing it with his
We have,
LMM and stuff. So
yeah, we have a real similar setup, air and fuel wise.
yeah, the Duramaxes are coming on strong. So I appreciate you reaching out to us,
Yep, no
chatting with
problem.
us. Good luck wrapping it up and
Yep,
at
thank you,
UCC.
Patrick. Yep. All right, see you later.
Don't forget, Diesel fans, make sure and head on over to Kershaw.kaiusa.com. Use code 23diesel20 for 20% off site wide. It's a great way to save some money and get some really cool gear, whether you need it for hunting, fishing, EDC, something to use around the house or job site. They've got a bunch of new models for 2023. The latest are the Duralock models, which the blade is made out of D2 steel, and the opening mechanism super smooth on it. Keeps your fingers away from the blade when you open and close it. And they got some really cool designs as well, and it's definitely priced right. So if you need something that that you need to work hard, something to carry every day, definitely check those out. Also, their other releases this year, and we appreciate them offering that discount code just for Diesel Podcast listeners. Also want to give a shout out to some of our Patreon supporters: Tyler Loewen at 23 Diesel, Jay, Cole, John, all of our other Patreons, all of you who subscribe on YouTube podcast apps or on our Discord, follow us on social media. We appreciate all your support throughout the years and look forward to bringing you more of the content that you want to hear in 2023. Until next time, keep the shiny side up.